thank the Panthers Club for putting on this today, and all the other support they've offered them, including later on this afternoon. We gathered this afternoon in remembrance of Roger Maxwell Cowan, to celebrate and to give thanks for his life and to bid him a loving farewell. And in doing so, we become aware that our lives are interrelated and reminds us of the fragility of our own relationships. But it also reminds us of the special and the unique way in which we relate to those people who cross our pathways during our lives. And Roger is a special person in our lives, and his passing has united us all here today. We've put aside all the things that we may normally be doing. We've joined everybody else here, our fellow mourners. Such are the relationships that we develop during our lives that it's likely that some of you here today don't know each other. But you share a common bond, and that is the respect and love for Roger. We're going to commence our service today with some words from Roger's grandchildren, who he is so proud of. And I'd like to invite them forward now, please.
Roger was an absolutely wonderful grandfather to all of his grandchildren, on whose behalf Melinda and I are speaking today. He was warm and caring, passionate and inspirational to those around him. I think this has really been echoed in the many messages of support my family has received over the last few weeks, and I would like to thank you for these messages. Roger took me on my first driving lesson at about the age of 14 or 15. In true Roger fashion, however, it was no ordinary lesson. In true Roger fashion, however, this driving lesson was no ordinary lesson. It was on a beautiful big patch of land on the bank of the Nepean River. There were two giant trees in the middle of the field, about 10 metres apart. I hopped up into the driver's seat of his massive Land Cruiser, and I very cautiously navigated the car between the two trees, turned around and repeated it until I gained enough confidence. Then we paused, and he looked at me and said, "Right, now let's do it in reverse." The lesson didn't actually stop until I was doing figure eights between the two trees, in reverse. Roger was our superhero. Sitting behind him in this same Land Cruiser, he towed a small fire engine out of a ditch. He climbed on the roof of his house and fought bushfires away. He drove us all around in his tractor while we sat in the scoop bucket. He set us challenges to achieve on family holidays. He led me around the field after the Panthers' victorious 2003 grand final and introduced me to the Prime Minister. He water skied in his suit, skydived and scuba dived, and saw incredible things. As evidence, he even took extreme close-up photos of his own wide eyes. Roger often did things that were unexpected. One time I was sitting next to him while he was driving half our family from somewhere in Penrith back home. We pulled into a red light behind my nana, Phyllis, in her car, packed full of the other half of the family. He looked across at me with his trademark smirk and very slowly edged his car forward, very slowly, until he gently nudged the back of Nana's car. Nana's hands flared up in the air over her head as we could all see her yelling at everyone else in the car in disbelief, and a giant smile took over his face as we all erupted in laughter.
Roger was our lighthouse. We looked to him for guidance and based our moral code around his. We looked to him when we were lost, and we tried to make life decisions that we knew would make him proud. Whenever we achieved our goals, he was there as a silent beacon of light, a wry smile and a chuckle as his mark of approval. He also quietly taught us lessons. We used to water ski often growing up, and one day on the lake, there appeared a plague of jellyfish. My friend and I were in the water, waiting for him to start the boat and desperately asking him to get us out of the water. We were screaming and generally just being ridiculous teenage girls. Roger wouldn't start the boat. He refused. He waited patiently until we were calm. He started the boat and then we carried on skiing. He always taught us to be calm in the face of fear and sit tight when times are tough. Roger had an enthusiasm for the world. He had an endlessly inquiring mind and would tell us all about the latest cutting-edge research and make us excited about the future. Even if we didn't completely understand it all at the time, we always wanted to hear what he had to say. Some of my favourite memories involve the family sitting around the table, drinking wine and discussing and debating the world. Roger made us think differently, solve problems, ask questions, wonder and dream. He made us kick goals, persevere in the sea of jellyfish that is life, and not stop until we were reversing in figure eights. Thank you, Roger. Thank you for everything.
Very unique man. And all of us that enjoy being part of Panthers today in 2017 owe much of it to Roger Cowan's vision and his passion. And it's not an ad for the current club, but just on 1,000 people are employed through Panthers, and just over 2.5 million people go through their doors each year. And that's Roger's legacy. That's what he's left, and the family should be proud of that. That 3-month trial in 1965, where he put his hand up as a school teacher to become the boss of the club, back over in its old position, saw him turn it into a 40-year career where he wasn't just a pioneer of the club industry, he was the pioneer of the club industry. You could say he was the father of what he did in the club industry today, and it's only what it is today because of Roger Cowan. No one has made an impact on the life of the people in Penrith like Roger has. To buy this land, to have the vision to buy this land when it was on the outskirts of Penrith, and he got some criticism for that, but the current club and the football team and being on the board, I know how important it is to have this land, and that will ensure that the club and the team survive well into the future. Of course, you can't talk about Roger, Panthers, without talking about footy, and I thought there was 3 appointments over Roger's career that were pivotal to our success. And while Roger stayed out of the nits and gritty, the tin tacks, the tactics of rugby league, he knew people and he knew how to pick people. And I thought his appointment of Tim Sheens as the first grade coach, and he did go out on a limb, Roger, to pick Tim, who wasn't a coach. He'd been out at Campbelltown as a retiring player. And I thought that turned the club around, because we're on our knees at that stage at the end of the 83 season. I thought the appointment of Phil Gould and then again the appointment of John Lang was just what the club needed at the time to pull together a group of junior league players to go on to win premierships, and Roger can always be proud of that. That didn't all work. There was some dodgy appointments too. And we seem to have a fascination back in the 70s of South African rugby players and rugby players in general. But Roger was always thinking outside the square. Sometimes the square turned a little bit circle, but not very often. Often he got it right. And often he did get it right. I met Roger as an 18-year-old in the summer of 83, and of course I was in awe of him, because even if you didn't know all the Penrith players at that stage, you certainly knew who Roger Cowan was, and his reputation preceded him. And I was fortunate enough to when we moved premises here in 1984, to work in the office for a bit, sort of the office boy with Sue McNeil. And I got to know Roger a bit better, and he was always very approachable. What amazed me was, and his granddaughter mentioned, just how he would always challenge your thinking, and Roger was always thinking of ways to do things better. Even though there was a program, and that program went to other clubs, and Roger's style of management helped us succeed in those clubs. But there was always that challenge to his employees and those around him to think outside the square and to have another way to solve a problem, which was the thing that always amazed me about Roger, apart from just being a good bloke. That's, you know, that was the other thing that stood out. Even though he was running a $100 million business, Roger was a great bloke that always cared about what his employees were doing apart from work. Roger made things happen. I think that sums it up. Roger Cowan just made things happen. I always respected him and still do. And to Phyllis, Max, Stephen and Phil and extended families, our deepest condolences from me and from those that I represent today, but Roger will always be a great man.
Thanks, Roger's son, Max, to the lectern. Thanks, Max.
They're just going to make sure I remain standing. Let me apologise in advance for how much time I'm going to take. I tried hard to keep it short, but I just couldn't. Last Wednesday, my brothers and our families were by Roger's bedside. He took his last breath. We'd been there on and off since his admission a couple of days earlier. All there together, telling stories that had been told and retold over and again, making jokes, poking fun, laughing and just carrying on. In many ways, it was a typical family get-together, the sort of thing we'd done for decades. Except for a couple of things. It was dry. No wine, no beer, no scotch. I can't ever remember that happening. And we were taking turns comforting Roger by stroking his head. That was definitely something new also to a Cowan gathering. It was difficult to tell if he understood any of our chatter, or took comfort in any of our laughter, or if he even knew that we were there. The staff at the hospital loved the fact that they could consistently hear laughter coming from his room. His amazing therapist, Nikki, dropped in for a visit. Nikki gave him a good talking to. She told him he was the strongest person she'd ever encountered. She told him how loved he was by the staff in the nursing home. She told him how much she'd learned from him and how much she admired him. It seemed like he was responding to her. Finally, she told him he could stop the fight. That he should know it would be okay to rest easy. Nikki left. Less than 10 minutes later, Roger left too. The silence of his final breath was shattering, but it was a great relief. His pain and his suffering was done. It was finished. Now, Nikki had found these qualities in Roger during a life stage when he was debilitated. He could hardly move, he could hardly speak. Yet his impact on her and on the staff at the nursing home was profound and it was powerful. Those qualities have been there his whole life. These same qualities that Nikki found have affected and inspired many. As with most attributes shown in old age, they can be traced back to childhood and youth, where they were forged. In Roger's case, by his father Norm and mother Mary. Norm and Mary came from big country families. They could be described as battling, but that would be a euphemism. In material terms, they were poor. But in many other ways, they were extremely rich. They were rich in strength and durability. They were rich in optimism. They held strong principles and passed them on to Roger and his younger sister Claire. In the book, Panthers, Passion and Politics, those values and principles are abridged to a few points. And these came pretty much from Roger's mother, Mary. Don't start fights. But if you're challenged, never ever show weakness. Always be strong, no matter what you face. Never intentionally or deliberately hurt anyone. In football terms, always play the ball, never the man. And learn, learn, and learn at every opportunity. Roger had these principles coursing through his veins as he first entered the gates of Lithgow High School. He was 11 years old. Most of his classmates were turning 13. He was only 15 when he had graduated. And throughout his school years, he worked with his dad, clearing land and planting and harvesting crops of potatoes on the share farming property that provided the family's income. He also worked in repetitious labouring jobs at the local brickworks. He was a 14-year-old schoolboy doing tough jobs that many men couldn't handle. Despite all this, and despite being so much younger, he still achieved high honours. Academically, he was dux of the school. He was the school vice-captain. He excelled at team and individual sports, and he captained the first grade football team. After high school, he was on to Teachers College at Bathurst. There he met Phyllis Snape. She took his hand and his name, and a few short years later, a lifetime of big fun was in play. A young couple with 4 boys under 7 years old. What a hoot, what a party. Roger had brought his capacity to work hard and for long hours into this family. He was teaching, he was playing football, he was starting businesses like a fruit shop in the middle of Penrith on High Street, and an ice cream van that he converted into a fleet of ice cream vans, and doing volunteer duties for the football club. So Roger was busy. Mum was busy too, she was teaching. But Mum was having all the fun herding us around. How did they do it? We were pretty wild. We could find some strife. But we had those Cowan genes, and we knew what we had to do. We knew we could look after ourselves, and we knew we could look after each other from a very young age. None of us felt at all neglected, ever. There was an abundance of care, of attention and love. In fact, Roger and Mum made sure that we always felt loved and protected. Any hardships that they may have been encountering were hidden from us. Sometimes they were disguised as adventures. Like one of the best holidays I can remember, Port Macquarie. For me, it was an amazing adventure, but for them, it was about avoiding debt collectors and trying to scrape together some money by selling encyclopedias door to door. We never twigged it was a problem, even when we searched for pennies under the car seat. Maybe we were just naive or stupid, but I think it was more about how much we enjoyed each other and how well they protected us. To us, Roger was simply Rog. Back then, it confused a lot of people. Stephen was once asked by a teacher, "Who was this Roger you keep on talking about?" Steve's reply was, "He's the bloke who drives the car." He was never Dad or Daddy or Pa or Papa or any of those, except when we were mad at him. It was an unconventional approach. It was egalitarian. An approach he also applied in his developing responsibility as a business manager and a leader. He stepped up his involvement with the club in late 1964. The catalyst was a debacle where the players couldn't be fully paid, and the paid officials and committee members didn't show up to tell the players. Roger was appalled. By 1965, as Greg mentioned and Barry mentioned, he'd taken the reins of the licensed club on a short trial, and he held those reins for 40 years until his premature retirement in 2005. How do you summarise those 40 years? I don't know. But his stewardship of this club affected thousands and produced many wonderful success stories. The fact that we're holding this venue here at this property, Panthers, on Mulgoa Road, says enough. The property expresses much of what Roger stood for. The property stands as a testimony to some of his major achievements. It's not so much the buildings, the bricks or the mortar, it's something less tangible. It's Roger's core principles, those core principles he got growing up. His values and practices, they're all reflected here on this property. The fight and resilience to first of all buy the property, which was a swampy cow paddock, and then endure the criticism, ridicule and predicted failures from dignitaries and local experts. The hard work then to move from Station Street to get this new club pumping. He threw himself into learning and researching and studying how businesses grow and change as they grow. Then he applied those learnings and sparked a revolution in the club's management and structure. He empowered and inspired many to reach beyond, to participate, to contribute and to extend their skills. Ultimately, this property was humming with a sense of purpose, participation and innovation that was carried by everyone here at the time. It was carried by everyone because Roger was one of everyone. And he led everyone as a first among equals. The Cowans were humming along too. Daughters-in-law joined in and grandchildren arrived. He was Rog to them all. He loved and admired them all and they him. They're all here today except for one, my youngest daughter Caitlin. Caitlin's in Ireland at the moment and she couldn't return. I can't really imagine how she is coping. She's so far away without the comfort and strength of her Nana Phyllis, her mum, her sisters, her uncles, aunts and cousins, and her dad. I hope you don't mind me indulging just a moment to read her message to Roger, her message for Roger, her message to us about Roger. Dear Rog, when I was little, I think I believed you were invincible. Or at least you would outlive us all. For a start, you were always fitter and healthier than our dads. And with more hair to boot. But even more than that, you had a steadiness and a calmness that never seemed to erode, even in the face of encroaching bushfires and panic from those around you. You taught me to face things head on, whether it was diving into the Great Barrier Reef, or here's another driving lesson, driving your massive four-wheel drive down that winding driveway into the bush track to the river's edge at Emu Plains for one of my first ever driving lessons. I think your honesty and integrity got you into trouble sometimes. I know you believed others would act with the same adherence to your principles. But it also earned you so much love and respect from such a broad range of people, which I'm sure is reflected here today. I wish that I could be there to share in this, to hear all the wonderful stories that people will tell about you and how you improved all our lives. It might be a cliche, but I think it's fair to say that I wasn't too far off when I imagined that you would outlive us all. All my love, Katie. Katie was 3 years old when the Panthers took the trophy in 1991. I can still see her on grand final day in her Brandy Alexander t-shirt, waving her streamers, in cheergirl routines with her cousin Melinda. 91 was a watershed year for the Panthers. That first elusive premiership was finally in the cabinet. It's no coincidence that the start of Panthers football successes began in the mid-80s. Roger had finally achieved his ambition of merging the governance and management of the football and licensed clubs. They could finally speak as a united voice. Panthers could operate and move forward on the foundation of solid principles and shared ambitions rather than the bickering and power play of personalities. The club started to play the ball instead of play the man. They didn't sit well with some. Still, it wasn't long before a young team with a majority of local juniors made the finals, then the grand final, and then took the trophy. Along with our football success in the 90s, the 90s started with some serious challenge. In the premiership year 91, the club was trading the house down, but not retaining much. Interest rates were through the roof. There was massive pressure on Roger, and he was feeling it. In the premiership year, 1991, my younger brother Pete died. He was only 30. Roger sat with him for days, stroking his hand, talking softly to him, making sure he was looked after, free from pain, that he wasn't facing death alone. Roger was strong, as you'd expect. Maybe he was too strong. The challenges of the 90s kept coming. The fight between media moguls over rugby league, the changing face of the club industry, more demanding regulations, increasing negative publicity, political battles, jumps in taxation rates. At Panthers, all these challenges and many others were met with the strength of a big team of motivated people operating under those values and principles that are central to this story. I've often heard it said that Roger was a one-man band. Undoubtedly, he had the top position. To that extent, he was one man alone at the top. But his power and effectiveness lay in his ability to inspire, to encourage, to get people wanting to play, participate and contribute. The one-man band label was just one of the many myths that Roger's success seemed to generate. Which brings me to a subject that is related to myth, but it's a bit more sinister. I tried to avoid this today, but I can't. Sorry. When I started thinking about what I had to say today, I realised I've been grieving for Roger for a long time. More than a decade. It was mild at first, but it gradually grew. In these last few years, it became a deep, burning grief mixed with white-hot anger. I know the exact moment it started. My grief started during Roger's address to members at his final Panthers annual general meeting. It was a simple thing, just a couple of phrases. And it went something like this. For those of you who have set out to hurt me, congratulations. You have success. You have won. Now, Roger comfortably put up his hand when he made mistakes, was often convinced about changing direction or shifting opinion. He easily admitted he was wrong, but I never ever heard him say he was defeated. It rocked me. He retired. He entered the period of his life when he should have been the aging and wise patriarch of this family that he loved and this family who revered him. When he should have been enjoying reading, studying and discussing the things he loved to explore, the sciences, human behaviour, mathematics, philosophy. Instead, the events that led to that statement of defeat, had pushed him across a tipping point. His retirement came early and it was disrupted. Make no mistake, we still had some great times together. Our gatherings always had Roger front and centre of the fun. But the air had changed. His body language was distorted. His confidence was lost. His ability to listen had diminished. He walked and he talked differently. He developed an edge of desperation and despair. He fell into depression. He engaged in unnecessary conflict with old and respected colleagues and friends. Some of this you can put down to the frailties of ageing. But most of it came from a group of people who designed strategies and actions purposely to achieve this result. Shamefully, this went as far as the Premier of this state, who completely discarded the Westminster system, merged the political and judicial arms of government, brought in the Fourth Estate, the media, all in order to rain down on a single individual on the basis of rumour and innuendo. The impact was, and it is, immense. The growing heat of my anger and grief as I witnessed Roger's, my dad's, a legend's decline is testament to that. Every member of my extended family has felt the effect. Now, I'm telling you this because I need to. I need to get it out of me. But I also tell it because Mary's principles and values remain in the Cowan genetics. What purpose is a life if in living it we don't apply our learning to shift the world to a better place, even if only slightly? And what good is the passing of a life if we don't learn something from what was past, what has passed? You each will take away what you will from Roger's life and from the passing of his life. Many of us will take a great deal, but two lessons stand out for me. The first is another of Mary's principles. Never intentionally set out to harm another person. This probably should be extended and say never deliberately cause another person loss or pain in order to promote your own position, power or wealth. The second comes from Roger's powerful belief in human dignity and the need to protect it in every single individual. Roger, the actions that robbed you of so much and robbed us of so much of you deserve condemnation. But you've taught me that actions can be separated from their perpetrators and that dignity can be preserved through forgiving. It would be a great application of the play the ball, not the man principle if we could forgive the perpetrators, not their actions, the perpetrators. Roger, I'll try. Roger, I'm sorry for keeping you in the spotlight for so long today. I know you would want all these good people to be raising a glass, telling stories and having a laugh. In closing, the world has changed for all of us. One of your lessons was that you can never step into the same river twice, and I know that you hope it stays that way. But right now, in my world, the trees are so much taller and I feel so much smaller. The moon is twice as lonely and the stars are half as bright. Farewell, Rog.
For a while, shine.